How's it going, everybody? So this week's episode, I'm going to take yet another turn, yet another topic. So this week we're going to talk about the state of gaming, and prepared a little bit of a statement here, just because I want to start this off on the right foot. So here it goes. I'm a big fan of the video game industry, and especially the indie game community, and I understand that many critiques may have an emotional toll due to the investment that many indie developers have with their communities. I'm not just, quote unquote, just hating on a game or a game distribution service simply because I don't like it. I'm pointing out flaws in the industry in the hope that developers and consumers alike can be protected by bad business practices in an industry I greatly appreciate and enjoy. As a gamer, I want to promote titles that propel the industry forward through design innovation. I want to be impressed by how intuitive the gaming experience becomes, as well as how design has changed for the better through targeted appreciation for developers that strive for improvement. So today's specific topic, and will likely be a series in which, at some point I do plan on having some guests and we can hear some of their opinions on these, but today I'm going to talk about something that I've just personally noticed. And like I said, there's going to be a series on this. I'm going to call it the state of gaming. So in this episode, we're going to talk about early access or early release. Early access and early release games allow smaller developers to start on the wrong foot at the expense of the consumer in almost every case. General acceptance by the industry of early access or early release games has far more downsides than good, in my personal opinion. But we can do something to make it better. But first, I think we need to have a little bit of the conversation about what my concerns are. And I do have a specific example that I've noticed just within my friend circle of gamers, and also, looking out on the internet at that example more, So one thing that I would say is a personal gripe, and it doesn't mean that, a few of these are going to be kind of gripes and opinions and kind of more of a rant. It's not necessarily wrong in some cases, but here it goes. So I personally think that early access and early release games, they do pull a significant amount of the populace into what they're already admitting is an unfinished game. And just in my opinion, I think that leaves many with a bad taste in their mouth. And just because this is really what it is, and I know that it's a charged term, but if I use some other wording or something like that, it could be misconstrued because it's not used as much. But fanboys, for example, somebody that just really, really likes something and is typically not capable of accepting criticism of that thing that they like. We see fanboys all the time, in famous cases like Star Wars, for example. Tons of fanboys in Star Wars, and I like Star Wars, so don't think that that's the case. But I'm also able to realize that Star Wars still does have it's a creative pursuit, whether I like it or not, or it's a movie that shaped kind of my imagination as a child, and also as an adult later on when they've made further movies in the series. But the point is like I can accept some criticisms about Star Wars as a genre, and the very the multitudes of art forms that have come out of that, whether they be books or other forms of media like video games, etc. I can listen to critiques of that and not be getting not getting upset at hearing that critique, and not necessarily just trying to block a person's critique just because of my emotional connection with a specific genre. So, fanboys of unfinished games, bringing us back more onto topic, it makes the discussion around the industry regularly toxic. And like I said, this is an issue with all media. And to be fair, you know, i- it's especially prevalent, in my opinion, in the gaming industry. I have not seen as big of a blowback on things from, like, say, movies or a TV show. I mean, there's still a blowback, and in some cases, yeah, they're about equal. But I would say the gaming industry, it's much more often. And I'm going to use an example, and this is one that's, going to be kind of charged. So once again, like I said, I'm not like attacking specific individuals. These are all comments that I've seen in the industry as a whole. Checking, you know, Pestily and all of these, people that play this game, but Escape from Tarkov. So, and I'm just going to use this as my personal experience because, that's just the best way that I can explain it. But there's other games that are in early access and early release that also check a lot of these boxes. And we're really just using this specific game as an example to propel ourselves forward for future conversations. We're trying to release ourselves right now from the emotional ties that we have with the game. We need to look at it and the industry of early access, early release. Like Mr. Spock, we need to look at this under a microphone, or excuse me, a microscope. We need to look at it under a microscope and determine, is that a good system and how could we do better? So here we go. So Escape from Tarkov is best described by me, and I guess if somebody has a better explanation, that's fine. But just for simplicity's sake, my description of Escape from Tarkov is a match-based tactical shooter with survival elements in a player-driven economy. And for those that don't know what the game is, it's essentially a hybrid version of the survival genre, which, key titles of the survival genre are Scum or DayZ, and it's a hybrid between survival and tactical shooters, which some main tactical shooters out there that are popular, especially on PC, would be like Rainbow Six Siege or Squad. So a few key points here about the industry and what I think has kind of created this little, dust devil that we're in, this shitstorm, so to speak. So the survival genre, in my opinion, has been lackluster for quite a while now, and it's left a vacuum. I mean, I'm sorry, Rust, I forgot to mention Rust there. I jotted down some notes before starting this podcast, but Rust is another example. It's like there's good things about that, but ultimately, are they the top ones? Like, are they taking the genre and pushing it to the best that it could be? And I would say, like, for example, in Rust, no, I don't. I don't think that they're pushing that genre to the best, because ultimately their entire model is around, uh, I mean, I don't know how I say this, but just douchiness, essentially, like toxicity. I've played a good fair amount of Rust. I've played more Tarkov. Played, about 50 to 70 hours, somewhere in between there. I don't even think there's a time ticker on the launcher, but I mean, I've streamed a number of times. I've played a fair amount of Tarkov. Like, I know it pretty well. And I've played about 20 hours or maybe 25, 30 hours or something of Rust. And I really feel like the survival genre, after playing almost all of the main titles, Conan Exiles, Rust, Daisy, Scum, I played quite a few of them, even Valheim, that just recently came out. It's still, even after seeing Valheim, the survival genre, in my opinion, is lackluster. It's not capitalizing. In most cases, it's not capitalizing upon what something could be and what interactions you can get people to have that are lasting and create those emotional bonds that, would be, arguably just a much better experience than what we've seen so far. So that being said, just to recap, the survival genre has been lackluster. Tactical shooters, in my opinion, have also become stagnant. Now, this is almost a different story, but just hear me out. I mean, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. But they don't innovate on the idea very much. It's, most of these games, let's be honest, are match-based shooters of some sort, of varying degrees. Of course, there might be more players in one game per match than other games, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's differences, yes. But would you say that a lot of the differences, or the differences you've noticed over time, and this is probably more geared towards people who have played games for more than a decade, maybe? I mean, they're not really innovating much. They're putting nice flashy graphics or whatever, but that is something that's going to happen as the hardware gets better regardless. That's not innovation of the software and design portion of the game. We're talking about systems that can involve more players, can create more experiences, all within the same simulated system. And what we keep getting is just kind of slight, you know, tips of the table towards a different direction, but it's not ever flipping the table on its head and then essentially coming out of that is a better table. That's not what we're seeing in the industry. So I think that, because of these two things, we are already in an issue because, as you can see where I'm going with this, any criticism of the game, coming back to Escape from Tarkov, is met with heavy resistance because of the desire for a good game that meets the demand of the vacuum fanboys. And like I said, I'm just using that term because it describes exactly what I'm talking about. So the industry sings the praise of a game that essentially doesn't have serious competition as of yet because it fills that need. So, I mean, we see all the time, and, like, just to look right now, Twitch. Let's look at Twitch and see how many people are streaming Escape from Tarkov. Sorry, somebody was just talking there. So right now, we've got 3.2 million people who follow Escape from Tarkov streams in general. And currently right now, and I'm recording this on a Monday at 2:50 p.m., there's just under 64,000 viewers that are watching all Tarkov streams. Does that sound to you like just a niche game? Like a game where, okay, well, it's early access, it's this or that. I just don't know. I'm not sure. That obviously there's something else going on here. And I'll try my best to kind of explain this, because ultimately when I look at Escape from Tarkov, I feel like, yes, it fills that need, but let's talk about it more frankly here. And this is, like I said, I think, the guys at Battle State Games, they have done something really, really good in some ways, but they also have, kind of some, in my opinion, some delusions, like I feel like they are just gonna use whatever excuse that they can to create a game that's less main, that's more maintainable rather than giving us a great product. I just really feel like there's so many things that these developers have been brought to their attention, and essentially their answer is, oh, well, it's a hardcore genre, quote unquote. So we're just going to put our head in the sand, and those features are Care Bear, and et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, dude. When you come over and you say that something is Care Bear, quote unquote, no, that's not Care Bear, okay? It's not Care Bear that somebody knows. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. So I've listed a few things here, and I'll get to what I was about to say. So just a second. So, all the while, this is an early access hardcore shooter game that has no matchmaking. None whatsoever. It's a shooter game that is currently a game in which you go into the world, you go into like a world and you join in via a match. It has a level system, but doesn't have any matchmaking. That just to me doesn't make the slightest bit of sense. I mean, there's been numerous times, like for example, perfect example, going to dorms. I mean, you essentially are making it so that people will get some sort of a kit together, and they're really, really good at essentially going straight over to dorms, and then they can mow essentially anybody the fuck down that they want. And if somebody that is equal in their gear shows up, they just fucking peace out and don't even risk the money in many cases. And some of them they might, because they make so much money and get all of the good loot off of the match, that anybody else that tries to get into there is essentially like they might as well win the lottery in some cases. Well, I mean, it's not that bad of odds, but you get my point. In comparison, it's like, dude, I might as well go to factory and wait it out until the last 2 or 3 minutes of the match, and then sprint up over to the office and just loot everybody that died up there, and then extract really quick. I mean, what's the point of me as a like a different or somebody that doesn't play the game for 50 or 60 hours to even bother screwing around with any good loot? And that's sad, really. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I could understand if you put a PvE protection around good loot or something, but to make it so that players just go over and fucking hoover up the loot just because they play the game, way more than anybody else can, that's to me not a good system. But let's continue. It has subpar movement. I'm pretty sure there is ladders somewhere, but I can't recall any time. I mean, I've seen ladders in the game. I've physically seen them. Walked up to them in the game, and I've looked at them. Why can't we climb a ladder in the game? I mean, is this really that tough of technology to have a character climb up and down a ladder? I mean, obviously it's something that should be intended because they put NPCs on top of buildings, and there's ladders on those buildings in which you could get to where the NPC is at. But of course, that doesn't happen. So essentially you put NPCs in a place where they're going to shoot at you, you shoot them, and in a looting game, you can't even go up and grab what the NPC had off of them. And you essentially have to either not go that way or shoot the NPC and risk having bloodthirsty PMC fuckers that just want to go around and shoot people like a Chad come over and kill you. And I'm just saying, like, this is the system that they put in the game. I'm just stating what exists right now. Jumping is just awful. It's awful, dude. Like, I really, and on this game specifically, I want to do a video on it, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But in general, movement is sluggish and unintuitive regularly. I mean, I'll be running with my character, and then I'll let go of the key. Like I'm running, I press shift and then W, and I start running. I can't unpress shift at that point to stop running. I can't at that point, once I've pressed shift, I can't stop running until I let go of W. So then if I let go of W and then want to just keep moving forward, my character stops. And then even though I've pressed W before the stopping, motion has even started, my character will still stop as I'm still pressing W because I've repressed it again far before the character has stopped. And then my character comes to a full stop, not being able to be changed in any way by me for like half a second or more. And then I'm able to start moving forward again at a regular speed. Movement is just not good in this game. It's not. Sound propagation is average at best, but it's regularly poor. I'm just serious. Like, even after they've put the updates for the sound in here, it has subpar survival elements. My guy can literally go into a match with a full stomach and full on water. Like, we came from the hideout. We chugged some water. We ate some Russian MREs. We're good. Some Russian rations or whatever. We're good. We're full on. 30 minutes into a match, my character is dying of starvation. That's utterly stupid and unrealistic, and it makes no fucking sense. It really doesn't. There's subpar loot mechanics. So, if I want to make more storage for my storage, like my in my hideout, I have to spend 3 million rubles. And the only thing that I'm able to do in the game is queue up for matches which are in combat zones to go look for parts for a storage container. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I don't think that you would have to go to some combat zone in order to find some nuts and bolts to put a chest together. And I certainly don't think that beyond all of that, it should cost 3 million rubles to go over and make it either. That's, once again, not a good system. It's just, that's Korean style shit. Like, that's really like, we're talking about something that Koreans are regularly given shit for. Creating unrealistic expectations in order to artificially make the game longer. That's what this game is doing. It has limited player-to-player interaction beyond bad guy shoot, which, that's not just this game. Lots of games are that way. Aren't we kind of, as an industry, I mean, yeah, it's cool to jump into a game and that's what it is. It's simple and straightforward. But really, is that all the interactions that we're just going to get anymore? Is just bad guy shoot? Or, hey, you're on my team, bad guy shoot? What? What? We could do more than this. And I think that even though they're still not that great, in that regard, Scum and DayZ has just destroyed Tarkov in that respect. I can go, there's numerous times, memorable times in fact, that I've been in Scum and have come across people who even outnumbered me and would be able to steal all of my stuff if they wanted. And they still walked up and they had interactions and, we hung out for a little bit and then we went on our merry way. And I never saw those people ever again, but I'll still always remember those interactions because we didn't kill each other. I mean, yes, people do kill each other in situations of duress and, societal collapse, but I don't think past like the chaotic stage when it's very first happening, 2 years later or something or whatever, I don't know that it's going to be as common as people make it out to be, or it would be as common that people are just going to be murdering somebody because they see somebody in the streets. What does that serve? To just cold-blooded murder somebody in a survival situation? That's all I'm saying. I'm saying people still do it, but I think that the logical decision would outweigh the illogical decision in the long run. So continuing on, there's a host of unrealistic and frustrating systems like payment. There's how many different payment methods? Like, really, come on. This just doesn't make any sense. And like the bartering, I suppose, makes kind of some sense or whatever, depending on the situation. But I don't think the lore of this is even that we don't have any of the, commodities of the current world or whatever. It's just a combat zone. It's not like, modems and payment systems, like blockchain technology or whatever. That still exists in this same world. So it makes no sense that I should have to have weird methods of exchanging currency between US and Russian and Bitcoin, just for example, and euros. Loot identification. Sorry, but if you're a combat veteran or whatever, you're a combat guy, and it just doesn't make any sense after a while that you wouldn't have identified just inherently certain items. To have the item blacked out just doesn't make a friggin' bit of sense. Don't put a description or something on it, but for it to be blacked out, it's not a good system. Crafting, once again, it's okay that we have crafting, but there needs to be other places you can go that aren't really necessarily considered to be combat zones, because otherwise it takes you out of the experience of, oh, okay, well, I guess the only way that I can get this item is if I go search for it in combat zones. So you're just queuing up to combat zone matches, when really, if you think about it, you would never do that. You would go with whatever the conservative option is because you don't have enough storage or whatever. And plus, on top of that, it shouldn't require overly specific items to make a chest. This is something that, primitives made with no screws or nails or anything like that. They just made it with friggin' rope. So it's stupid that you should need all these specialized tools to make something like a chest. Weapon modding, in my opinion, in this game, it's just not intuitive. Once again, you're taking somebody that is a layperson and having them play a game, kind of essentially kind of role playing as this, this mercenary or whatever, or this person that goes into combat zones and gathers friggin' toothpaste and really strange loot for whatever reason. But on top of that, it's like, why can't I just craft something with some friggin' wood or something? Why do I have to use these very specific items to go over and craft what I need? And like, some of the recipes just don't really make a lot of sense. It's just not very good. Extraction, once again, just because I don't make it out of an area in 30 minutes doesn't mean that I can't walk my happy ass back to the hideout. For you to lose all of your loot because you're standing in the wilderness is stupid. And I'm sorry, that almost in and of itself makes it to where I don't want to play the game. Like, just that one single factor. It's stupid that I should lose all of my stuff if I'm in some general contiguous zone and somebody hasn't come over and looted my stuff. It doesn't make any sense that I can't just hoof it back over to my hideout, wherever that may be. It's idiotic, and it's clearly catering to an incorrect or a faulty system. I mean, and we can go through some more in detail, but I'm just going to name the rest of these off because I want to get to the next part. But team identification, I've mentioned that one a ton of times. You have no idea who's on your team unless you essentially look at their character model beforehand and memorize it and hope that somebody else doesn't come around that looks pretty close to about what that character model does, wearing the same clothes, etc. And even then, I still don't think that it's great, because if I go to a place like this with a team and we all go together, it just, like, there's not enough that's allowed in the game for players to create some sort of a usable and robust system to identify their teammates. Now, does it have to be like an overlay or something like that, like we see in Warzone, or Ghost? You can see like the ghost of your teammates or something like that through walls or something like that. It doesn't have to be that. I get that, but I do think that it could be a better system. And map reading. I mean, if I go to a zone, I'm for sure gonna, and I'm a combat veteran, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna read a map. But the point is there's all of these things that just looking at this game and trying to take the Mr. Spock magnifying glass or microscope, like I said, to this game, if these features may be added at some point, but it's not a finished game. And even if it was a finished game, it would be drastically, even in its basic concepts, it would be not good. It's not pushing the industry to be better. So, I mean, there are plenty of good things about this game, but in my mind, I'm just saying, all of these other things, they detract from the main fun parts of the game so much that whatever's left that's actually good to talk about isn't worth the effort. The deal has been broken long before I had the chance to recognize the gunplay and maps are pretty good and deserve recognition. Many people who are fans of that genre are okay with playing a subpar game that isn't actually finished yet, and will sink thousands of hours into that game regardless of its problems. A survival game that has no building in it. And granted, it's got those survival elements, so like if they remove those out of there, I'll take the conversation and I'll say, okay, well, I can't make that argument anymore. But for right now, they have all of these kind of survival elements canned in such a way so that it kind of ruins the system. And I'll admit, like Scum, when I played it last, had a subpar building system. But at least they had one, for freaking sake, Like, Tarkov doesn't have that. And I don't think that Scum's gunplay was that bad. It isn't as good as Tarkov, I'll admit that. Of course, there's difference between a third-person / first-person and a first-person game. DayZ, I think, has it has okay gunplay, not as good as Tarkov, but at least there's those social interactions. And I'm just saying, like, you have to be able to look at these things and realize that just because there's this want or need for a specific game concept doesn't mean that we should just pass up criticism. So really, I mean, what I'm trying to say here is we need to really recognize if we are a fanboy and allow the industry to criticize aspects of itself. And, whatever those favorite games are, they reside within that industry. And ultimately, we're wanting to propel people to make better art in the long run. Escape from Tarkov and its core concept, just as an example, is a deal breaker for me because I personally prefer a more realistic survival experience to that of a match-based tactical shooter with survival elements. If I have to run 20 minutes in the woods to go get loot, then run 20 minutes back to bring it to the base, I can actually construct. I'm fine with that. At least I can make a chest to store items I pick up without having to spend 3 million rubles, and without having to collect highly specific parts in a conflict zone. I really feel like there's so much more that these survival genres can do, and Tarkov's not the answer. It makes the problem worse, in my opinion. there's also like kind of stepping away from Tarkov. And like I said, I just used that game. I don't necessarily hate Escape from Tarkov. I just don't think it's as good as a game as what many people, especially within my personal circles, like to frame it as. But there's other reasons, as far as the early access, early release industry and why it's bad. And, like for example, games come out as a scam to get people to buy in, and then they bail out after the profits have been made. And just to be clear, I'm shifting from Tarkov. Tarkov has not done that. They've been upfront this whole entire development cycle, as far as I know, about what they're going to release and have given good community goals, and they're actually pretty good about doing updates. So I'm not talking about Battlestate games, but here's a few examples of games that did come out as a scam. Chronicles of Illyria. And I'll put a video by the Lazy Peon. You should check out his channel sometime. But he did a report on this Chronicles of Illyria. Essentially, this game company, quote unquote, went over and made this game and promised all these features, and it was going to be an MMO. Yet again, another industry that's starved for content and is, just, they're not really asking for it. I guess that's not the right term that I was going to use, but they're primed, I guess. They are susceptible. They're susceptible to being scammed because there's this vacuum and there's this perceived need for new content and for something new, something fresh. And this Chronicles of Illyria comes out and has even development videos, of different features. And when it all came out, it was all just a scam. And, the main guy scammed people out of millions of dollars. That kind of doesn't build great trust for the industry. There's another MMO that was slated to come out, and this one's a little bit older, but it's called Identity. It was going to be almost like a Second Life style game where you can be anything that you want. Like you could be a police officer. Of course, they were advertising you could be a drug dealer. And then the police officers can arrest the drug dealers. You could be like a criminal. You could be a retail store person or a banker. You could supposedly all of these systems were to be put into the game. But ultimately, it was a scam. And once again, people got screwed out of their money. And, I'm sure there are lawsuits that are arising from that, but it's not a cut and dry deal by any means. So I just want to, I guess, make people think about the industry and where it's going and where it's been. This past 2 years, we've seen essentially, in my opinion, and like I said, this is just opinion, and I'd be glad to have the discussion if somebody wants to come on and have it. But I've seen essentially the fall of Blizzard. I've seen the fall of Bethesda. We've seen, the rise and fall of various other game developers that were much more shorter lived. We saw a stark fall in BioWare, and we've seen the continual downfall still happening. It's kind of surprising because it's like, I don't know if they were ever necessarily highly respected past, the mid 1990s or maybe the early 2000s. But like EA, they're just continually getting worse and worse. They are the worst of offenders. But specifically, let's get back on topic here. In terms of early access, early release, here's a few solutions that I have, and I'll leave this with that. We should criticize games that are in early access, early release state for too long and are without a definitive end date or goal. The players, they really need to push the developers to have better plans, because as we've seen with like CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk, piss poor planning got them and us, the consumers, piss poor results. You can't make games very easily these days without having a good plan for development put into place, because ultimately, yeah, I mean, you can develop a game for certain with hardly any plan. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that are talented enough to do that. But what product are you going to be giving, and what metric are you going to be allowing to test all of these variables that we have seen time and time again go wrong from big developers even? And I'm just saying that early access it's good to give developers, especially the smaller developers, an ability to, develop while gaining some income. But there needs to be better checks and balances for this system. And I don't see any other way of providing those checks and balances uh, without the consumers being on board with it. We should prosecute individuals and companies that take advantage of consumers by promoting non existent video game projects, quote unquote, in bad faith with the intent of scamming the fans. And I think that already kind of happens to a degree, or does happen to to a degree, but we really need to harshly punish bad industry practices. I mean, in general. And I'll go into this more in other videos in the series, but talking specifically about early access, early release, this is probably the worst as it gets. Like a game that's put in development and is drug along, and then we find out that it was a fraud from the start. This is the worst, and we need to stop it. These people that do this, they're literally ruining our industry, and they're opening the door to other people to try the same exact thing because they think that they're going to get away with it. They're promoting bad practices to be used on us in the future, and there will be people who will take advantage of these vacuums, like I said. They're going to use people's tendency to be fanboys to their advantage to make money. It's the same thing in politics. We should promote games, and this will be the final little bit here. We should promote games we like for good reasons, not just for emotional gratification. There's a reason that Mario games are so popular, and it's likely that the genre that game inhabits, platforming or whatever, depending on the Mario game, there's a lot of them, and they, fill various different genres, and sometimes in a hybrid sense. But point being is like the genre that those games inhabit could be better in many ways, but we're just not seeing it because we're just hyper focused upon what we've seen as to be the best. We can sit down and think of great ideas that are realistic, that don't even require lengthy R&D or research and development, for design. I mean, these systems are recognizable even to people that don't develop video games to be subpar or not sufficient to meet the demand for the gaming industry. Which, keep in mind the gaming industry is bigger money wise than the movie industry. There's more money in it. So I'm just saying, like, it's not like people aren't making money in the gaming industry. It's not like poor old developers, they're making some serious cash. Even indie developers can hit the millionaire spot very quickly. And not all of them necessarily make a studio after that. They go over and they've made their game and they walk away. But going back to having, promoting games for good reasons, if we're more critical of the art that's presented to us, then we're able to push the industry to innovate, which may bring up some bad ideas, certainly, but it will ultimately make the industry more competitive and more interesting in the long run. So, I mean, it's perfectly okay to be a fanboy. I'm a fanboy of Star Wars in many ways, but I'm a reformed fanboy where I'm capable of looking at Star Wars and realizing that, and maybe the better example here is like I'm a huge Metal Gear Solid fan. And, for many years I did have kind of a fanboy attitude about the series. But even after learning more, and even after kind of observing how I acted towards those games that I had an emotional connection to, I'm still able to realize that Metal Gear Solid 2 has some awful first person shooting. Like, I don't even know why I even played that game back then because it's that frustrating after seeing better systems later on. I can acknowledge that the story in the newest Metal Gear Solid, where it's an open world, Metal Gear Solid 5, is lacking in comparison to other stories. I still like it, and I'm still going to play the game, and I'm still a fan of the series, even though Hideo Kojima has gone his separate ways and really doesn't even have that IP anymore. But point being is I'm capable of recognizing that, you know what, Metal Gear Solid's not for everybody. It does have its flaws, and I do think that that series in particular is worth promoting because they did push the industry into a innovative and creative direction in which I would like to see pushed even further. But overall, we just need to try to make the industry better. We can do it. And it's these discussions that are the start to something even greater down the road. So, if this is content that you like, please hit the subscribe button if you're watching me on YouTube. Please hit the like and share button if you're listening to this on Facebook. And as always, thanks for listening.